All right, so hopefully you have joined us to talk about gaining confidence in different writing assignments. So as you take classes at LBC, you're going to find that the professors are going to assign you all kinds of assignments with different expectations, different descriptions. But hopefully from this presentation, you'll get to see that a lot of these assignments have expectations and elements in common, as well as some kind of unique things. So this presentation will be kind of divided into two parts. I'll begin by talking about some general expectations that you should keep in mind whenever you're writing for at the college level. And then we'll break down specific assignments. And hopefully you'll start to see some assignment types that look familiar to you. And that may be where you want to ask questions about specific assignments that you have. I've bookmarked this link that you can look at on your own. I'm going to click on it now. And this is an Introduction to Academic Reading and Writing Libguide. So it's connected to the library page. And later, if you'd like, I can show you how to get there. But we've put this together to introduce students to all the steps in the reading and writing process and to provide lots of helpful tips about academic writing. So I'll be referring to this quite a bit, and I suggest that when you've got some time that you look at the different elements in it, and it will be something really helpful to refer to later as you complete assignments. Okay, so I'm first going to list the typical assignments that you might encounter during your courses at LBC. So a lot of you might have received a reading response or a journal entry. Discussion posts are very common. Outlines, either outlines of reading you've done or outlines for papers might be assigned to you. Annotated bibliographies are often assigned by professors who give big papers and they want you to break down your research process. Book reviews are an assignment I've seen in literature and history courses. You might want to look out for those. Of course, research papers are going to show up in a lot of your courses and are often the culminating assignment. Instead of a final, you may have a research paper for a course. Synthesis assignments, I've also seen a lot of adult learner courses having as a culminating assignment. So this is a pretty comprehensive list of the kind of assignment types that you're going to see on Canvas as you take courses at LBC.
What time,
All right, so the first question is, I've got a writing assignment. How do I begin? Read the assignment as soon as you receive it. So even if you're not planning on working for 2 hours that night, as soon as you get an assignment, read it. That way you can start to let it marinate in your mind. You can get a sense of what the professor expects. And you can also figure out if you have any questions as early as possible. So you're not waiting till the last minute to contact the professor. Look for the topic or general idea that the assignment will address. I don't know how many students I've had, they see discussion posts or they see some word and they start writing and they haven't looked carefully at what I'm looking for. So make sure you get a general idea about what the assignment is addressing. Very often when professors construct an assignment, the first couple of sentences will address the general idea or the topic, give a little context. So that's a really good place to look for, okay, what ballpark is the professor in? Identify words that indicate what the professor expects. There are often active verbs like analyze, examine, summarize, compare and contrast, conclude, hypothesize, evaluate. Look for those words. Those are used intentionally to let you know what the purpose of the assignment is. So break down what are those active verbs that the professor is using in the assignment description. Another thing that students often rush past are the specific readings. What specific pages or passages does the professor want you to address? So sometimes students will start writing about a book we've been working on, and they talk about chapters that they really like that they read 3 weeks ago, but they neglect the reading that I want them to focus on in this particular assignment. So make sure that along with the topic or general idea, you've identified what reading you need to be working with. Look for specific expectations in terms of length, structure, and tone. Is this supposed to be 1 to 2 paragraphs or 5 to 7 pages? Is it supposed to be double spaced? Am I supposed to use Mla formatting? Can I use the first person and use a more informal tone, or does this need to be more formal? Do I need to have in-text citations in a works cited page? All of these specific expectations are usually outlined in the assignment. Make sure to go through those carefully. I'm not going to click on it, but this link at the bottom from the UNC Chapel Hill's Writing Center is an excellent resource that kind of talks you through how to read, understand, and analyze a typical college level assignment. So definitely check that out. I've given a lot of the information here, but it goes into more detail. Any questions? All right, we'll keep going. Okay, so that's how we begin. Now let's talk about some of the common expectations. What are most professors going to be looking for in most assignments? This is a phrase I see a lot: demonstrate understanding. To do this, you're going to need to critically read and understand whatever text the professor has assigned you. Right here is a link, and I'm just going to click on this one to show you, to our academic reading and writing guide. And it gives you some helpful tips about what critical reading means. Critical reading means more than just a basic understanding of the text. You're going to need to understand what's important in the text. What's the writer's perspective? How does this text compare to other texts you've read? What are the supporting details that support the main point? What is the thesis of the text? So critical reading is essential to demonstrate understanding. So that's going to be something really important that you're going to want to do whenever you tackle a writing assignment. You may be asked to summarize a passage, present its main points, identify key terms, or the professor may want you to go a step further and analyze the passage. What's strong about its argument? What's weak? What assumptions is it based on? What's missing? How is it important in the field? Why is this something that every social worker or every Christian or every teacher should read? So demonstrate understanding is very common vocabulary that you're going to see in a writing assignment. Present original ideas. You'll often see this phrase in writing assignments as well. What does the professor want to do when he or she says this? He or she wants you to analyze the reading and respond to it in an original way. They want to hear from you. What's your response to this video or this text? What do you think about the validity of the text's argument? What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? What would you add to or take away from its content? How does it resonate with other things that you're reading in the class or other experiences you've had? So the great thing about college is that you're invited to interact with the texts and present original, novel ideas that come from you. So it's not just absorbing the material, but it's also putting out something new as well. Here's another phrase you might see: make connections. So the professor doesn't want you to read the book or the article or watch the video in a bubble, in a vacuum. They want to know, how are you making connections between what you're looking at now and your own experience, or what you're reading now and other readings you've had in the course, or what you're reading now and what you believe about what the Bible says. How does it square with your biblical worldview? So in making these connections, you're not only showing what you know about these other texts and experiences, you're also comparing and contrasting. So how is this text similar to others I've read? How is it different? How does it add to a perspective we've been reading in class, or how does it contradict it? We've been talking about these themes in our class, or these essential ideas. How does this text contribute to our understanding of the Psalms or our understanding of the Old Testament, for example? So how does this text fit in to the overarching theme of the course? So when the professor asks you to make connections, you're doing a lot of this text to self, text to text, text to world, all these connections in your writing. Here's one you're going to see a lot of, often in final papers: provide an argument. This is where the professor wants you to pick a position and support that position with evidence from the text. So, what is your view on a perhaps controversial issue, and how can you support it using evidence from articles, books, videos that you're exposed to in the course? In addition to providing an argument and supporting it with evidence, you want to use argumentative language: should, must, ought to, as well as clear transitions like as a result, however, therefore, in addition, to show that you're building a logical argument. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is very frequently the type of assignment that you'll be asked to do, providing an argument. Another phrase you might see: use academic conventions. What does that mean? Regardless of the type of assignment, whether it's something formal like a paper or informal like a discussion post, the professor still expects correct grammar, punctuation, and capitalization. And as much as possible, just get into the habit of avoiding slang and informal language. Even assignments that seem kind of casual, like a discussion post where you're just sort of chatting with your classmates, it's still really good to get into the habit of using correct grammar, proper sentence structure, punctuation, capitalization, even citations. So sometimes students don't think they need citations in a discussion post or in an informal reading response. I think as a student, it's such a great habit to get used to using appropriate citations, because then it doesn't feel like a stretch when you're required to do it in a full-length paper. This is a resource that you can use that talks just generally about what academic style looks like across all types of assignments. All right, before I go on, does anyone have any questions about anything we've covered so far? Great, we'll keep going then. Next, we're going to just talk about some general rules. So I picked out some language that you're going to see in a lot of writing assignments. Now we're going to, again, look at assignments in general and some rules that if you follow, you can't go wrong with. The first thing you want to do is always approach an assignment using clear organization. So you want to expect that you'll have to take a position or make some sort of claim. Generally, writing assignments expect to hear your perspective on something. So in order to do that, you want to build a strong thesis statement. Thesis statements are the key to any kind of writing. I'm just going to show you this link. I'm not going to go into detail on thesis statements particularly, but the thesis statement will be your map for your paper. It will tell us what your position is and how you plan on supporting it. Developing a thesis statement early in the writing process will help you organize your research, will help you organize your writing, will help you figure out your introduction and conclusion, will help you figure out how to use transitions. It's the key part of your paper. So a strong thesis statement is vital to a strong writing assignment. So make sure that you do that as early in the process as possible. Now, sometimes the thesis statement changes as you do more research, but you want to make sure that you're always coming back to, what is my thesis statement? What is the main idea of my paper? Am I staying true to my thesis statement, or am I contradicting it or going off track? So a thesis statement really contributes to clear organization. Another thing that's so important that will take us back to our grade school days, but still holds true for college writing, is strong paragraph structure. Clear, cohesive paragraphs make for very clear, cohesive writing. And I like to use this TEST acronym with students. I think it's a really easy way to remember good paragraph structure. So the T, this went off the screen, let me move this here. The T stands for topic sentence. Make sure that every paragraph begins with a clear topic sentence that states the main idea of the paragraph. And make sure that your topic sentence supports your thesis statement. A nice way to approach a writing assignment is to write your thesis statement and then figure out what all your topic sentences are going to be, because that's going to tell you what all your supporting ideas are going to be. And then you can take each of those topic sentences and expand them into paragraphs. So the topic sentence is kind of the bones. If we consider the thesis statement kind of the skull, then the topic sentences are all the bones that hang together to form the skeleton of the paper. After you've developed your topic sentence for a paragraph, you want to support it with evidence, and you want to make sure that the evidence that you use, the sentences to fill in the paragraph that you use, directly support your topic sentence. Make sure that they aren't contradicting your topic sentence. Make sure that they aren't supporting some other topic. A tight, well-organized paragraph has evidence that supports the topic sentence. That's where you'll use your research. So that's where you'll have your quotes, your summaries, your paraphrases of material with your citations. If you're starting your paragraph with a topic sentence and following it with evidence, you'll want to think of this rule as you write paragraphs, that you never start a paragraph with someone else's words. So you never start a paragraph with a quote or some cited material, because that's evidence. That's supposed to support the topic sentence. You want to start your paragraph with a sentence in your own words, telling your reader what the paragraph's going to be about. Then you follow it with evidence, which can include a quote or a summary or a paraphrase. Close your paragraph with a summary statement. This is something that students often forget, and they just move on to a new idea. And you'll find that if you basically summarize or restate your topic sentence at the end of your paragraph, it gives your paragraph a really nice whole structure. Again, start the paragraph in your own words with a topic sentence, end the paragraph in your own words with a summary statement. Don't end with some point or some quote. End it with your own words, reiterating your topic sentence. So T, topic sentence, E, evidence, S, summary statement, T, transitions. Start each paragraph with a transition if necessary, first, second, third, but also use transitions in your paragraph that build from one sentence to the next. Show how your ideas in your paragraph are connected. Again, I just wrote, don't start or end a paragraph with a quote or paraphrase, but use your own wording. This is a great resource right here that goes to our research guide that will give you a lot of tips like the ones I've just given you here about writing effective paragraphs. So clear organization means a strong thesis statement, clear cohesive paragraphs, and then finally think about a strong introduction and a conclusion. Even a really short discussion post or a really short journal response always look and sound better if you have an introduction or a conclusion. So even when you write a discussion post, think about a sentence you could start with that introduces the idea for an intro, and think about a quick sentence you can put at the end to kind of close your idea and give even your discussion post some shape to it. For longer assignments that have more formal introductions and conclusions, I have a link right here to a resource that's going to give you some really helpful material about how to create a strong introduction and a strong conclusion. But you'll be surprised how much better your writing, even for short assignments, will sound and feel if you reserve some time for an intro and a conclusion. And I always suggest that students write the intro and the conclusion last. Thesis statement first, then build your body so that you have that in place. Then after you've seen what you're going to say, then work on your introduction and your conclusion. And you'll find that those will all hang together really well. Any questions? Yes, Charles.
Yeah, you said you are going to send all this to us, right?
Correct. Yes, you'll have a link to this presentation. Yep, and you'll be able to.
But I'll be able to catch up. All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, I know I'm going through it really quickly. There's a lot here, so definitely once you get, you'll be able to take your time and review it. Any other questions?
Yes, in the introductory paragraph.
Yeah.
It's still common to make short statements of like in a 5-paragraph research paper,
Mhm.
cite the 3 main points you want to make in the whole paper, just like as quick summaries, and then expand upon them later?
Yeah, that's one way that you can do it. I like to think of the introduction as an upside down triangle. And so at the end of your introduction, you put your thesis statement. So Ray, that's going to be where you tell the reader, this is what I'm going to argue in this paper. And you do it in a quick statement. Then the rest of the introduction leading to the thesis statement, I would actually give some background or maybe grab the reader's attention with a story. I wouldn't do too much summary in your introduction because then you've kind of given it all away and it actually may not be as interesting then to read your paper. It may feel repetitive. So I like the idea of setting some stage, grabbing your reader's attention, and then just ending your intro with your thesis statement that will give the map for the rest of the paper.
Yeah, because actually I mentioned in a paper from the last course I did,
Mhm.
I had mentioned one of the evidence points I wanted to make in
Yeah.
my introduction.
Yeah,
And he said, okay, this is repetitive. You already mentioned this.
right.
It's like, no, I was mentioning it and
Yeah.
now I'm expanding upon it.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to give away too much. So I think of the introduction more as setting the stage. And then the thesis statement kind of opens the door. The paper will give us the meat of your argument. Yep, great question.
And then just summarize, I can include it in the concluding paragraph.
Yes. So the conclusion, yeah, I think of Ray, I use this picture of the upside down triangle for the introduction. Think of your conclusion as a regular triangle, narrow to broad. So start your conclusion by a quick summary of your thesis statement. Don't don't go through the whole thing, just in 1 or 2 sentences reminding us about, the meat of your paper. And then think about how you can go broad. So you don't want to introduce any new ideas, but this could be where you have a call to action, an application, right? Kind of, what do you want the reader to do with this information? If you think about a good sermon, the preacher often ends with something that kind of gets you to think about, okay, how can I apply this? What can I do next? The conclusion is a really good place to put that.
Okay.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Of course, sure. Thanks for the question. Anyone else? All right, we'll keep moving. Please feel free to stop me if something comes up. Okay, so I talked about clear organization. The next general rule is intentionally incorporate content. Actually, I'm just gonna pause for a bit. I hear something in the chat. Does every writing assignment need a thesis statement? Excellent question. I would say yes. A thesis statement is a statement of purpose. If you go into every writing assignment thinking, what is my purpose? What do I plan to do in this writing assignment? You're going to end up with a much clearer, concise writing assignment. And if you you state your purpose, you're also going to be able to check, am I doing what the professor wants? Am I answering the question or am I doing something completely off? So I would say, as much as possible, think in terms of a thesis statement. Now, the thesis statement may not have 3 points of support. It may be shorter than one for a full paper. But thinking about what's the main purpose of what I'm doing in this writing assignment, let me tell the reader that first and then flesh it out, I think is a great rule. So I would say yes. Consider using a thesis statement for any kind of writing assignment. Great question. All right, so clear organization, intentionally incorporate content. What do I mean by that? First of all, like I said at the beginning, make sure that you know what reading you're supposed to be using for this assignment and make sure to use it. So your professor is going to want to see specific references to the reading, select examples from the reading, showing that you're actually, reading the reading and relating it to what you're trying to say. You may be required or may want to refer to previous readings, or you may be asked to refer to the Bible or your own experience. Again, this is often described in the assignment, but not always. Generally, there's at least one direction about the type of reading that you should be referring to. Use in-text citations when quoting from or referring to a text. So this is where you're going to want to make sure that you understand MLA formatting or APA formatting, depending on the course you're taking, and citing correctly. Even in a discussion post, get in the habit of using an in-text citation. A works cited page isn't always required by a professor for a discussion post or something informal, but I think it's so good to get into the habit of using in-text citations and works cited pages, again, because then when you've got a long paper, you're in the habit of doing that. I really like using this ICE method to follow when incorporating research. So let's say you've got a great quote or you have this passage you've summarized and you want to use it in your writing. Don't just drop it into your writing so that it doesn't fit, it doesn't flow, the professor doesn't know why you've used it. Use this ICE method. So the first thing you're going to want to do is introduce your source. Dr. Jones states, researchers find, something to let me know, a signal phrase to let me know what's coming, who's saying this, where's this information coming from. Then, after that introduction, give the quote or the paraphrase and follow it with your citation. Don't forget to cite. So I introduce, C cite, and then the last step, which, oh, I'm sorry, this went ahead. The last step, which students often neglect, is the E, explain. You've given me this fantastic quote or this interesting material. Why have you put that there? What is the essential idea? How does it tie to your overall argument? How does it compare with what else you've been saying? What is your evaluation of the material? So introduce your source, cite your source, and then tell me a little bit about why it's important. Basically, this author supports the idea that, in other words, this source contradicts the notion that, something to show us why you chose to use this material. That way, it doesn't feel like you just dropped a quote in. It feels like you're actually processing the information and bringing it into your own thinking and your own writing. Okay, so remember ICE. I mentioned this before. Determine the appropriate conventions. So clear organization, intentionally incorporate content, determine the appropriate conventions. As much as possible, maintain an academic tone. Get into the habit of using formal language, avoid slang, avoid acronyms unless they're specifically related to the material that you're studying, avoid informal language. One of the big questions I get is, can I use I? Can I say I believe? That's where you want to ask the professor. So very often professors are fine with using the word I in a discussion post or a journal entry, but very often they don't want I in a research paper or a synthesis paper. So rather than assuming that it's okay to say, I believe this and we should do this, check with your professor. I like to encourage students to get into the habit of not even using the first person if possible. See how you can state things in an objective, neutral, academic way. That's just a great habit to get into. Generally avoid second person pronouns. So you should do this, you should believe this. Generally not appropriate for academic writing. So try and get into the habit of avoiding first person and eliminate second person. It is usually not acceptable in any kind of academic writing. Okay, I think there's a question. Can you give an example of formal tone? Great question. Okay, so I think one thing that I've seen students do is that they want to use the first person and say, I believe this. But if the paper is something that is being written for Christians, you can easily replace I with Christians should, believers should. So that's one way to avoid I. Informal language might be contractions, can't, won't, don't. Try to avoid those and use cannot, will not, do not. And then other words like kids, moms and dads, awesome, lot of, language that we might use when we're talking to each other, we would want to replace with more formal terms: parents, children, significant, stuff, things, vague terms like that also should be replaced with more specific words that have to do with what you're writing about. So those would be some examples of formal versus informal language. Any other questions? Great questions, thank you. All right, let's go on. I've said this before, and I say this a lot, that a lot of these things are habits that are good to build for all kinds of writing assignments. And I think another one that's really important is building a habit of citation. So even for informal assignments like discussion posts and journal entries, get into the habit of putting in an in-text citation. First of all, that way you avoid plagiarism, and you get used to using correct citations whenever you're referring to anything, even a biblical passage. A works cited page, a separate works cited page may not be required by your professor, but again, use it, make one. You're never going to get docked for adding a works cited page. So get into the habit of building that for anything that you submit. I know I've been referring to Mla formatting and APA formatting, and I don't have time specifically in this presentation to go into that in detail, but I'm just going to click on this link, which will take you to our research guide that goes into MLA and APA formatting and provides a lot of resources about how to write in MLA or APA. So definitely check that out for more details about how to format according to the style requirements for your course. I see a few questions here. Is it okay to use self-pronouns when writing a biography? Yes, so I think if the professor is asking for something where you're sharing your personal experience like that, absolutely. So there will be certain assignments where it's completely acceptable. How do we identify when we need to cite versus when we don't? Another great question. And my answer would be, when in doubt, cite. So if you're not sure, cite. Cite all the time. That way you can't fall into the trap of plagiarism or just get out of the habit of citing. So you can't go wrong citing. I've linked the library database page here, but as you're doing research, whether it be for a discussion post or something more formal like a paper, use the cite feature on the library's databases to help you with citations. And if it would be helpful, let me know. We can definitely put together a presentation on how to use library resources well, and that's something that I can get into in detail. But you can also schedule an appointment with the librarian, and they can show you how to use the library features, including the citation features. All right, now that I've given you some general tips for writing, what about specific assignments? Before I go on, I'm just going to check the chat to see if there's another question. Ray's telling us Scribr has a nice meal format template. Is that for paragraph writing, Ray? Or is that for MLA formatting? I'm not sure if Ray can hear me. Ray, I was just referring to your comment about Scribr, the template you mentioned. I don't know if you can hear me well. We'll come back to that. Let's talk about specific assignments. Okay, so something that you're going to see a lot are reading responses. MLA, yes. Thank you, Ray. Yes, Scribr has a good MLA formatting template. Thank you. Reading responses will require you to use specific texts. Make sure you know the exact pages or the exact passage or the chapter that you're supposed to be using and refer to it. Show the professor that you've read it. So Reading responses are often a way that professors gauge whether you've done the reading. Show that you've done the reading by referring to the texts in thoughtful ways and answering all the questions listed by the professor. Very often, the professor will give you a series of questions. Sometimes they're even in a bulleted list. Use those to create topic sentences. So if you have a question, the answer to the question can be one of your topic sentences. And you can organize your writing really well that way, and you can make sure that you've answered all the questions in the prompt. So make the prompt work for you. Allow it to be your map for writing out your response. Make sure that you're using examples and details from the text. Use the ICE method like that I showed you to make it fit well with your writing, and accompany that with citations. I'll keep saying this again. Avoid informal language and slang. Find out whether first-person pronouns are acceptable or not. So Charles's example of a biography, first person is completely acceptable. But maybe a reading response where the professor just wants you to summarize and does not want to hear your opinion. First person is not acceptable there. So always ask the professor when in doubt. Like I just said, provide opinions and connections to personal experience only if requested. So the professor may not want to hear your take on something. They may just want you to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of an argument or summarize the main points of an argument. So make sure that you only provide opinions if they're requested in the assignment. Follow the length requirements. If it says 1 to 2 paragraphs, don't write 3 sentences. If it says 1 to 2 pages, don't write 2 paragraphs. So those things are all there intentionally by the professor, and make sure to follow them. Reading responses and journal entries are often very similar. Sometimes journal entries might be a bit more personal. Just make sure that you're responding to the specific question presented. So here's I had a great question earlier. Is a thesis statement necessary for all types of assignments? A journal entry may seem kind of a more informal assignment, but if there's a specific question, think about what the answer to that specific question will be. That's going to be your thesis statement. How do you incorporate a biblical worldview into your current profession? If you're allowed to use first person, I incorporate a biblical worldview into my current profession by A, B, and C. There's your thesis statement. Now, all of your writing that will follow will support that thesis statement. And you've got a nice, well-organized journal entry. So use the question to create your thesis statement and then respond accordingly. First person is often acceptable in these types of assignments, but still keep it formal, keep it academic in tone. If there are texts you're supposed to refer to, make sure that you respond to them and accompany them with citations, and always follow the length requirements. Accounting journal entries. Renee, I see your question. So we do not need to use citations for accounting journal entries. That is a good question, and I am not sure about that. Is anyone else here taking accounting that might have an answer to that? Renee, would you feel comfortable, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you feel comfortable explaining what an accounting journal entry might look like, so I might be able to better answer your question?
Okay, so I've never had to do it at work, and so I really didn't think that it did, but when you had journal entries up there, because I do journal entries at work, that made me think of that.
Mm-hmm.
But normally you have a debit on one side and a credit
Sure.
on the other, and like I do payroll, so I have a payroll.
Right, right.
But it's off of a specific payroll, and I've never had to put a citation on those, so.
Yeah. So it probably isn't applicable to that kind of a journal entry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking of things that are more writing intensive, like Bible courses, English courses, social work, that kind of thing.
I'm doing a number.
Pardon?
When I think of a journal entry, I'm thinking of numbers, so.
Okay, got it, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, got it. So yes, I'm the word person. So numbers I leave to you, but yes, these are more word related journal entries. Thank you. Great question. All right, we'll keep going. Another thing you've probably seen and done a lot of already are discussion posts. It's funny, sometimes students see discussion posts and think, oh, that's easy. I just can say what I think and listen to what other people say, but it's really good to even approach discussion posts very systematically and very carefully. Usually, the professor is looking for 2 to 3 paragraphs in a discussion post, especially if they use that word substantive. They want more than a couple sentences. So think of it as about 2 to 3 paragraphs. First person, again, is often acceptable because you're having a conversation about what you think and you're responding to other classmates, but still maintain an academic tone. I love when students incorporate texts and citations into their discussion posts. I think that shows a different level of thinking, and I think you should do that as well. Professors will also often ask not only to post, right, but to respond to your classmates. And again, they will often ask for substantive responses. So what does that mean? What are they looking for? They don't just want you to say, I agree, Sally, or great job, Mike, or I disagree, but they want you to comment. What are common themes that you see? Where do you have something in common with what they've said and what you've said? What are connections that you make between your own post or your own experience and what they've written? What are questions that you have about specific elements in their post? Or do you have a new idea that you'd like them to consider? Those are the kind of things that you can do to make your response substantive. Finally, be respectful. Make sure that whatever you post is respectful to your class community. So we have a confession. I do not really love in-text citations. How do I grow to love them? Great question. I don't know how we can grow to love it, but I think it's kind of like eating your veggies. Not all of us love eating veggies. Maybe some of us do. But when we get into the habit of eating them, they just become second nature. And so I think that if you do it consistently, even in the small assignments, it's not going to feel as much of a burden when you have to do it for a long paper because you've been doing it along the way. That's the only advice that I can give. That is, as you get more comfortable, just getting in the habit. Every time I use something from a book, I put in the author's name and the page number because that's what's required by MLA. I do it in my discussion post. I do it in my journal entry. So when I'm writing a paper, I'm in the habit of doing it. That's my best attempt at how to love in-text citations. Okay, outlines. Outlines of assigned reading. So you've done some reading and the professor asks for an outline. Basically, and you probably grew up doing outlines in grade school or in high school, identify the important points, identify the supporting ideas. Very often, headings can help you find important points. Very often, topic sentences, the first or second sentence of a paragraph can give you the important points. Important points, supporting ideas. That's what the professor is looking for in an outline. Very often the professor will ask for a specific format. So they may want complete sentences, or they may just want bulleted points. They may want the formal structure with the Roman numerals and the capital letters and the lowercase letters. Again, if you're not sure, ask the professor. Because they may not have put something down, but they may still have something in mind. So make sure that if they're looking for something more specific in terms of format, that you find that out. So a couple questions. Oh, good. I see some responses to each other. Let's go back. Can you reiterate how to make connections to a peer's post, please? Thank you for that question. Let me go back to discussion posts. So I think the first thing you can think of is a me too. So I'll often have students in one of my classes post about steps that they like to take in the writing process or ways that they prepare for a large paper. So if a student writes, I like to create mind maps, I enjoy writing outlines, something like that is in their post. You can respond by saying, I've also found mind maps to be helpful in my writing. I also enjoy using outlines for longer papers. Now you're making connections with the peer. You can also bring up a new idea. Have you ever tried the website Coggle that creates mind maps virtually? Have you ever tried using free writing or brainstorming as another method to prepare for a large paper? So find connections, ask a question, find something that you want your peer to consider. So it shows respect and kind of a processing of what they're saying, as well as offering them something new to think about. That's what I consider a substantive response. I've also seen students say, I really like the way you described your experience with pre-writing. I've never thought of it that way before. Next time I pre-write, I plan on using the same strategy. So also highlighting something that you really appreciate, something very specific, rather than just saying, I really like what you said, saying something specific that you appreciate about your peer and talking about how you may plan to use the idea or build further upon it. I think is also another way to respond substantively to your peers. Give me an assignment example. What is your take? Rita, would you mind just filling me in a little bit more about your question so I can understand what you're asking?
Sure, for an assignment.
Mm-hmm.
For a written assignment,
Mm-hmm.
questions there that say, what is your take?
What is your take? Yes, excellent question. I would say that is just sort of an informal way of asking, what's your perspective? It's sort of an argument. What's your position on this topic and why? So if it is an article on some controversial issue, what's your position? What do you believe? And why do you believe that? So professors will want you to also support that with evidence. Rita, did the assignment come with some reading or something that you're supposed to refer to as part of your response?
Was it too cold in there?
Not specifically to a reading, but with your input of your, with the, what do you call that? The substances? What is it?
Substantive response, yeah? Mhm.
Yes, I apologize.
No.
So it was in reference to that.
Mhm.
However, but by you saying that, okay, so if your take is, so when you get that question with an assignment, do you specifically have to write down, my take on this is this and this and this and that? Or should I start with my perspective on this literature that I read on this certain book, this certain page indicates, and you may connect that with another book. So
Right.
I have to make it clear to the professor, specifically, this is my take on this and this and that, or should I go ahead and say, academically speaking, this is a perspective, and he should he or she should understand as a professor.
Right. That's a great question. So the first thing is, what is your take is very like an informal question. So now I can't get in the professor's head, but to me it sounds like they do want to hear your personal opinion. And you can use I believe this. However, Rita, I would say that to set apart your response, also adding, not only is this my personal opinion, but I can support it with this reading that we did in class, or this scripture that I've read, or this article that we've used. That just sort of deepens your response. So it may not be required, but it certainly will set apart your response, because it shows that not only are you just sort of talking from experience and opinion, but you can actually back it up with something that you've read in class, especially if it's something that you've read or talked about in class. That really makes it a powerful response. Is that helpful?
It is helpful, yes. So basically what I was trying to look for, if it was necessary, just to make it clear to the professors that grammatically just add in there, because the question is, what is your take? So when I am writing literature, should I add there, this is my take, my perspective? Should I add those words in there so they know specifically what is my take?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to respond. My take is blah, 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 blah. This is also based on my reading of, or this scripture. So yeah, definitely use the professor's words in your response. And that's a good way to know that you're covering everything that's in the assignment.
Okay, so we're looking at opinions and perspectives.
Yes, for that particular assignment, it does sound like that. What is your take?
Okay.
A question like, what is the author's argument and supporting evidence in this article? The professor is not looking for an opinion there, right? The professor wants you to analyze the reading for what's important and is not interested in your opinion on it. So it really is based on the assignment, which is why the wording of the assignment is so important. So Rita, it's great that you're breaking it down, not just assuming, because that wording is very important to indicate what the professor is looking for. Great question. I'm seeing, okay. Any other questions? All right. So we talked about outlines of your reading. Very similarly, outlines for a paper. So the professor has set up a process to prepare and plan for a long paper and may ask you to create an outline early in the process. Before you even start the outline, look over the assignment description and figure out what is the purpose of this paper and who is my audience. I'm sorry that did that. Let me just go back to play. Okay. Audience is a really important thing to think about when you're writing a paper, especially if it's a paper where you have to create an argument. Then you know, thinking about the audience helps you to think about who am I trying to convince and what will I need to write to convince them. So often the professor will say, imagine that you are writing to this group of people. And so that lets you know the type of information you should use, what kind of background they may have that will affect what you include in the paper. Those kind of indicators are really helpful even before writing an outline, because that will help you figure out and plan what you're going to put in your paper. So before you even start your outline, identify the paper's purpose and audience, then develop your thesis statement. Figure out what your position is and how you're going to support it, because that's going to be what your outline hangs upon. After you've developed your thesis statement, then you're going to want to figure out what are my main points of evidence. Under each of those, what are my subpoints or supporting ideas? I strongly encourage students, even in the outline stage, somewhere to write down all the citation stuff. What's the works cited entry going to be? What's the in-text citation going to be? That way, when you write your paper, you're not hunting that down, but you have it on your outline. Again, Follow whatever format the professor requests. So they may want complete sentences, they may want just bulleted points, or they may want a very formal structure. This link will take you to some really helpful resources on how to approach an outline, as well as different ways to set up an outline. So that's definitely something that you should check out if you plan on doing outlining. Annotated bibliographies. So these are also often assigned as an early part of the writing process for research papers. They ask you to get a list of your sources and then show specific information about the source and how you're going to use it in your paper. So an annotated bibliography is basically an expanded works cited page if you're using MLA style, or a references page if you're using APA. You'll have each source cited according to whatever style you're using. And then under each source, you need to provide an annotation, which is basically a short paragraph or two summarizing the main points of the source, talking about how valid the source is or how credible the author is, and talking about how you plan to use the source. Are you going to use it to support a main point? Is it going to be part of your conclusion? Is it going to be part of your counter argument or refutation? Usually these are the kinds of things that you put in an annotation. So it's a works cited page with a paragraph or two under each source talking about the source in more detail. Annotated bibliographies are really great because once you have all that information in place, then you can use that to write your paper with a lot more ease, because you've started to already write down the main information from your sources. There's a resource here that shows you how to write a good annotated bibliography and gives some examples. So definitely check that out if you end up having to write an annotated bibliography. Any questions? All right, book reviews. Haven't seen a lot of these, but I've come across them now and then with students. A book review is not a book report. Remember, if you think about a movie review or a book review, you don't want someone to tell you the whole story. You want a short summary, but you also want an evaluation of the work. So you want to hear, is this something you recommend or why? When you're preparing a book review, there are some things to think about: the context, the setting, the background of the author, what was going on at the time that this was written that makes it important. What is its thesis, or if it's fiction, what is its overarching theme or idea? What are some important details about the author or his or her body of work? The other things that they've written that may help me understand this text better. Who is this book written for? Who's the intended audience? And so who would I recommend it to? So a book review is a lot more analytical and evaluative than a book report. So if you get a book review, you're going to want to think about these additional questions and not just summarize the book. There's a resource here from the UNC Writing Center that's really helpful for book reviews. I use that a lot with students. So definitely check that out if you end up having to write a book review. The big one, research papers. If you haven't written one yet, believe me, you'll write one soon for a course, and they're often assigned at the end of the semester. So you're going to want to make sure, especially because you folks are in accelerated programs where you don't have a lot of time in a course, you want to make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to plan. As soon as you get your syllabus or your Canvas page, read that assignment description for the final paper. Don't wait till just before it's due and you're working on it. Look at it early in the semester, early in the module, so that if you have any questions or you need to know where to go with it, you can ask questions early. So I definitely recommend checking that out as soon as possible. This link will take you to an assignment calculator, which is basically this tool, virtual tool that will help you plan out your time. So definitely check that out if you like using tools like that to manage your time. It gets you to put in the date your paper is due and then today's date, and it sort of gives you a plan for your paper. So that's really helpful. A lot of professors ask for scholarly sources. Use academic or scholarly or peer-reviewed articles for your paper. If you're not sure what that is, schedule an appointment with a research librarian, and they'll show you how to find academic resources on the library database. You don't want to use a Google search for that. There are very specific types of articles that you want to use. So there's a link there that will take you to the library page where you can schedule an appointment with a research librarian. Another thing, craft that thesis statement early. Figure out what you're going to say early in the process. Then you know where your research is going and where your writing is going. Again, make the assignment description work for you. Get every bit of information you can from it. How long is this supposed to be? How many sources am I supposed to use? How many supporting points should it have? Should there be a counter argument? Do I need to incorporate a biblical worldview? Do I need to talk about who my audience is? Look for those things in the assignment description so that you have all of that in your paper. Research papers should always be written in a formal and academic tone. So avoid first person and second person pronouns, avoid slang, avoid informal language, use specific terms, and make sure that everything that you say is clear and related to the topic. Any questions?
I do have a question.
Yes. Is that Rita?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Rita.
Okay, so at the beginning of the training, I remember you said about writing too much because you're giving it all away.
Yeah, right?
I usually, and they get bored. So with reading all that information, and I'm known to write a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it could look as brainstorming or a story at times.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on, like, my literature can look different. It can look like it can look at times like a simple report, or it can look like a story.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, don't give it all away, please tell me, what are my limits? What can I say that will keep them interested in reading my story? Because I thought that the purpose of going to college was to do the best and just show the best work that you can. So now you have a puzzle here.
Okay. And absolutely, going to college is showing the best work that you can. And so the question is, how can you do that in a way that keeps your reader engaged, right? So you want them to keep reading your story, keep listening to what you say. So I consider the introduction kind of, like I said earlier, the setting of the stage. So how can you if you think of a good movie or a good book, often it's that opening scene or that first chapter that pulls you in and gets you to want to read more. So I like to think of the introduction as that, and that may be by using a great quote, or maybe a small story or an anecdote that gets us into what you're about to say. Then you save all of the, if it's an academic paper, the supporting information, the arguing of points, the rest of your evidence for the body of your paper. So you may want to have a little something in your introduction, but you want to make sure that the reader stays engaged. So you want to make sure that you kind of pace what you're going to say throughout the paper. And that's where, because a lot of the writing you're going to do for college is more academic and not always written like fiction, I guess. That's where paragraph structure and things are important, where each point is organized and separate from the one that follows. So I don't know if that answers your question, but you kind of want to think a bit about it as a chain, where you kind of open up and then each point becomes a chain that links to the one before it, so that your reader can follow that chain and it doesn't sort of feel like it's a tangle where you're going back and forth.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes in our head, it's very clear, right? We know what we believe, we know our experiences. Writing it out for someone objective, it sometimes doesn't come out as clear. And that's where some of the stuff that I'm talking about here, the formal structure, can help to make it clear so that your professor can truly understand the depth and the ideas that you're trying to say. Thank you. Great question.
Sure.
Any other questions? All right, final assignment type, synthesis assignments. I've seen these with a number of classes, and I would say these can be the hardest type of assignment, partly because you need to have spent time reading your sources well. So synthesizing means putting things together to create something new. And when a professor asks you to do synthesis, they want you to take 2 or more sources and show how they're related to each other. Not just how they're related to each other, but what new ideas can be drawn from them. So that really takes some time because you've got to first read each of your sources carefully, know what they're saying, understand their main points, and then put them side by side. See what's common, see what ideas are similar, find ways that they contradict each other or disagree, and then talk about, okay, these 2 sources say this, therefore we can draw this conclusion. Or this source builds on this source and offers this new idea. You're not going to get these assignments a lot, but synthesis is something that your professor is actually going to want to be doing all the time. One reading builds on the next. One idea builds on the next. They're related to each other. So once you're done with the reading, don't put it out of your mind and move on to the next one. Look at the ways that they, like a chain, connect to each other. And what's that new idea or new learning that's emerging? This is a good resource here, linked to the bottom on synthesis. But that synthesizing is actually something that is unique to college level reading and writing. So it's kind of what makes college different from high school, and graduate work, I think Charles, you were talking about a master's degree, graduate work different from undergrad, where you're asked to show how different texts work together. I see something in the chat. I was just going to ask you about synthesis papers. Wonderful. Christina, anything I can add to that? Any questions about that you might have, since I guess you've had one assigned to you? Christina, I noticed that you were going to ask about synthesis papers. Is there anything else I can add to that, since it sounds like you've had a synthesis paper assigned to you?
She's responding in the chat.
In the chat, okay. Perfect. I'm starting the brainstorming. How should I go about it? Thank you, okay. So Christina, if I can ask, is the professor asking you to do a synthesis of like 2 articles or a number of texts? Is there a little information you can give me there? Not sure yet, okay. So in general, I would say, think about the important readings, often if it's a couple of textbooks that you've been working through. Figure out what are the main ideas, main takeaways from those readings. How are they similar? How are they different? What do I agree with? What don't I agree with? What overall conclusion can I draw? So these 2 textbooks have all of these ideas. What overall conclusion or common idea can I draw from those 2 textbooks? Or do they disagree a lot and mean that there needs to be more research on this idea? So basically, it's a lot of compare and contrasting to figure out what's similar, what's different, what new ideas can we draw from the reading. So that's how I would approach that. And Christina, definitely synthesis assignments are not easy. So please consider making an appointment with us when you get more information. And we'd be happy at the Ally Center to work through that with you. Which leads me to the end of this presentation. Thank you for your patience. I know this took a little longer than an hour. I had a lot there. here's the information for you to get in contact with us. I'll also be sending an email with this presentation attached so you can email me directly. Please, 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 we're here to help you. Please contact us and set up a session if you're feeling overwhelmed, or even if you just want some feedback on your writing. That's what we're here for. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And before I close up, I just want to make sure that I got everyone's name. So Christina, I didn't put you on my list. And I also noticed Crystal, there you are. I think you joined us after I put our petition. Six, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay. I got everyone. All right. So I have been talking for a while. Thank you for your patience and for your attention and for your wonderful questions. Any other questions I can answer?
I have one.
Yes, Crystal.
Will we be able to refer back to the Zoom later? Will it be saved?
Yes, so I'm recording it and it will be saved. I'm also going to send you the link to the slideshow.
The link. Okay,
All
thanks.
those links. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. This was very informative.
I'm so
Thank you
glad.
so much.
Thank you for taking time. I know all of you are busy and I know this is the dinner hour, so thank you for joining us. Look out for announcements about these webinars. We'll be doing one once a month. And when you get the email with the presentation, please email me back if there's a topic you'd like a presentation on. I know a lot of people get concerned about in-text citations and learning to love them, like Christina said, and MLA formatting, and that's definitely something we can do, library research, or other specific writing topics. So please let me know if there's something you think would be helpful to you and your classmates.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I will let
Thank you
you
again.
go. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks
You
for
too.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Charles. Bye.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you. It was a lot. This was very, very helpful.
I'm so glad. I'm glad.
Although I've been in school for 5 years, I learned things in this class that I did not learn even in 101 or 151.
Okay, good, good.
So this was really
That's great.
good.
That's great. And did I hear you say you're starting your master's?
Yeah, I'm just finishing up my bachelor's to this